After my wife passed away, I thought the hardest part was over. But I was wrong. A week later, we gathered for the inheritance meeting, and that's when everything changed. My daughter-in-law sat across from me, her face blank at first. Then she smiled, a cold, calculated smile that sent shivers down my spine. And what she said next. It turned grief into rage and shattered everything I thought I knew about my own family. When my wife passed away, it felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. 32 years of marriage ended in a single moment, leaving me staring at the empty side of the bed every night, wondering how I would ever go on. The funeral was packed. Neighbors, distant relatives, colleagues, all came to pay their respects. People hugged me, whispered, "Stay strong," and offered casseroles I never touched. But their pity didn't comfort me. Nothing could. My daughter Anna clung to me during the service, tears streaming down her face. She looked broken, but she was there. She spoke kindly about her mother, remembering the way she used to hum while cooking or how she never missed a school recital. For a brief moment I felt proud. At least one of my children had inherited her mother's warmth. But my son David was different. He looked distant, his face pale but his eyes unfocused. He stood at the edge of the room, checking his phone when he thought no one was watching. I wanted to believe it was his way of coping, but the way his wife Clara whispered into his ear every few minutes told me otherwise. Clara, my daughter-in-law, was dressed impeccably, her black dress perfectly tailored, her hair styled like she was attending a business meeting rather than mourning a death. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, but her cheeks were dry. I noticed little things that day. How Clara never once looked at the casket. How she avoided hugging Anna, as if grief was contagious. How instead of comforting her husband, she seemed to be reminding him of something. Their whispers were constant, their eyes occasionally darting toward me. Then there was my brother-in-law, Henry, my wife's younger brother. He tried to look supportive, but even he slipped once, leaning over to a cousin and saying, "You know, she owned half the family land. Wonder what will happen to that now?" He didn't realize I was within earshot. My stomach tightened. Even on the day we laid her to rest, people were already thinking about inheritance. After the service, neighbors came up to me. Mrs. Clark from next door offered, "If you need help around the house, I'm right there." Her eyes were kind, genuine. But then behind her I caught Clara's cold stare. She wasn't looking at Mrs. Clark. She was looking at me, calculating, as though my vulnerability was a puzzle she intended to solve. Later that evening, when everyone had gone home, I sat alone in our living room surrounded by flowers and sympathy cards. The house smelled of lilies and sorrow. Anna sat quietly beside me, holding my hand while David excused himself to take yet another call. Clara followed him, heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Their voices were muffled, but I caught fragments. Timing, money, his decision. I wanted to believe grief was making me paranoid, but the truth settled like a stone in my gut. I wasn't imagining it. There was something in Clara's eyes that day, a glint that didn't belong at a funeral. And I knew, though I couldn't yet prove it, that this was only the beginning. The week after the funeral felt endless. Grief should have united us as a family, but instead, it exposed cracks I hadn't wanted to see. The house was full of people the first few days, neighbors dropping off food, relatives staying over to support me. But slowly, one by one, they left, until only my children and Clara remained. That's when the atmosphere shifted. Anna spent most of her time helping me organize my wife's belongings. She cried while folding her mother's scarves, laughed softly at old photos, and told me stories I had forgotten. She carried her grief openly. The way her mother would have. David, however, became restless. He paced around the house, sighing heavily, making excuses to step outside for business calls. And Clara? She was always by his side, whispering into his ear, occasionally giving me polite but empty smiles. On the fourth night, I overheard them in the kitchen. "We need to talk to him soon," Clara hissed. "The longer we wait, the more complicated it gets." David muttered something I couldn't catch, and Clara snapped, "You think Anna will just step aside? You think she'll give up her share without a fight? Don't be naive. We have to secure our future." My heart clenched. They weren't talking about grief or family or memories. They were talking about inheritance. My wife's life had barely ended, and already her legacy was being carved up like meat at a butcher's block. The next morning, Clara approached me in the kitchen. Her voice was soft, sweet, too sweet. "Dad," she began, though the way she said it felt forced. "I know this is difficult for you, but maybe it's time to think about practical matters. The accounts, the property, all the responsibilities your wife used to handle." Her eyes were steady, her tone calm, but beneath it was an urgency she couldn't hide. I stared at her for a long moment before answering. "Your mother-in-law hasn't even been gone 2 weeks, Clara. Don't you think it's a little early to discuss money?" Her lips curled into the faintest smile. "I only mean well. We just want to make sure everything is handled properly." But I wasn't fooled. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the wedding photo of me and my wife. Her smile in that picture was full of life, of love, of promises we had kept for 3 decades. And now the woman who had been my partner, my anchor, was gone. And the people who should have honored her memory were already scheming. Even Henry, my brother-in-law, showed his true colors. He called me one evening, voice cautious but curious. "So, what's the plan for the land? You know, the property her parents left her. Maybe it would be best to sell it quickly before it loses value." I clenched my jaw. Even he was circling. The house that once echoed with my wife's laughter now echoed with whispers of money, property, inheritance. It felt less like a home and more like a hunting ground, and I was the prey, and Clara. She wasn't just whispering anymore. She was positioning herself step by step to take control. The day of the inheritance meeting arrived sooner than I expected. I hadn't been ready. Emotionally, I was still drowning in grief. But legally, things had to move forward. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, arrived at the house, a tall man in his 60s with graying hair and a calm but firm voice. He had been my wife's family attorney for years, trusted and professional. He greeted me with genuine sympathy, offering his condolences once again. But as we all gathered around the long dining table, I felt the tension in the air like static before a storm. Anna sat close to me, her hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes downcast but strong. David sat across from her, but his eyes kept darting to Clara as though seeking her approval. And Clara, she leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, an icy little smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. When Mr. Thompson opened his briefcase and began sorting papers, Clara's eyes lit up in a way that sent a chill through me. "Shall we get started?" the lawyer said gently. Clara leaned forward immediately. "Yes, please. We've all been waiting." Anna frowned at her but said nothing. Mr. Thompson began explaining. "Your late wife left a will, carefully written and notarized. She outlined how her estate, assets, and personal belongings were to be divided. I will read it aloud now, and then we can discuss any necessary legal steps." I closed my eyes for a moment, bracing myself. As he read, the words felt heavy. The house, the savings, the farmland her parents had left her, the jewelry she had inherited from her grandmother. Everything was mentioned in painstaking detail. And then it came to the division. A portion set aside for Anna, a portion for David. Some land to be donated to charity as per her last wishes, and a small emergency fund she had created for her husband, should he ever need it in later years. When Anna heard her name, her eyes filled with tears, not because of the money, but because she knew her mother had thought of her. She whispered softly, "Mum always wanted to make things fair." David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Clara, however, stiffened. Her smile vanished for a moment, replaced by something sharper, darker. She interrupted. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson. You said some land would go to charity. Which land exactly?" Mr. Thompson glanced at the will. "Yes, the property near Willow Creek, the one your mother-in-law cherished as a childhood retreat. She was very clear about donating it to a foundation." Clara's lips tightened. "That land is valuable. Are you telling me it's just being given away?" Her voice dripped with disbelief, almost contempt. Anna's head snapped up. "That's what Mom wanted. Why is that a problem?" Clara's eyes flashed. "Because your mother clearly didn't understand the financial reality. That property could secure futures for her children, for her grandchildren. Giving it away is irresponsible." The room fell silent. Even Mr. Thompson seemed momentarily stunned. I finally spoke, my voice low but firm. "Clara, this is not about what you think is best. It's about what my wife decided. And I'll honor her wishes." Clara leaned back again, her smile returning, but this time it was colder, sharper. She didn't argue further, but the look in her eyes said enough. This wasn't over. Mr. Thompson continued reading, explaining the process of transferring titles and accounts. But my mind wasn't on the legalities anymore. It was on Clara, the way she sat there. At this point, I have to ask you, what would you do if your own family turned against you like this? Think about it. And while you do, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because stories like this one are only getting crazier from here. Calm yet calculating, already thinking of ways to twist this situation to her advantage. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. This inheritance meeting wasn't just about dividing property. It was a battlefield. And Clara was ready to fight. The lawyer's voice droned on, but the words had begun to blur. My wife's wishes were laid bare in black and white, but the reactions around the table were louder than anything on the page. Anna sat with her back straight, nodding solemnly as each part of the will was read. She wasn't thinking of what she gained. She was thinking of her mother. David, however, kept rubbing his temples, his eyes darting nervously between the lawyer and his wife. He looked like a man torn between loyalty and pressure, a man whose silence was being purchased by Clara's whispers. And Clara. Clara was calm, too calm. Her expression was unreadable at first, but when Mr. Thompson reached the final section of the will, she tilted her head slightly and that smile appeared, cold, controlled, almost victorious. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. Lastly, your mother stated that under no circumstances should her jewelry, particularly the family heirloom necklace, be sold. She wanted it to stay within the family, passed down to Anna. Anna gasped softly, her hands flying to her mouth. That necklace? She promised me. When I was little, her voice cracked with emotion, but Clara's smile widened. She leaned forward slowly, her hands clasped on the table. So Anna gets the jewelry, the charity gets the land, and David, what does he really get? Half of what remains, Mr. Thompson answered evenly. That is correct. The division was made to reflect fairness as your mother-in-law saw it. Clara let out a small laugh. Not warm, not amused, a hollow, cutting laugh. Fairness? Do you really call this fairness? My husband, her son, gets scraps while his sister walks away with heirlooms and Charity takes property worth millions. Anna's eyes widened in disbelief. Scraps, how can you even say that? Mom loved us both equally. She wanted. Clara cut her off sharply. Your mother wasn't thinking clearly. She was sentimental, emotional. But we have to think about reality. The future. And the future isn't built on sentimental jewelry or giving away land to some faceless foundation. The future is built on money, on assets that can actually provide security. The room went ice cold. David tried to interject. Clara, maybe we should... But Clara silenced him with just a look. A look that said she wasn't here to compromise. I finally slammed my hand against the table. Enough. This was your mother-in-law's will. Her final wishes, they are not up for debate. Not from you. Not from anyone. For a long moment, no one spoke. The ticking of the old clock on the wall was the only sound in the room. Then Clara leaned back in her chair, her cold smile returning sharper than ever. We'll see, she said softly. Just 2 words, but they sliced through the silence like a knife. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat again, clearly uncomfortable. I believe that concludes the reading. The next steps will be paperwork, signatures, and transfers. I'll leave instructions with each of you. He began gathering his files, but my mind was elsewhere. I looked at Clara, and for the first time, I realized she wasn't merely disappointed or frustrated. She was plotting. That cold smile wasn't acceptance, it was a warning. She wasn't going to let this go quietly, and in that moment a chill ran through me. The battle hadn't ended with the reading of the will. It had only just begun. After the lawyer left, the silence in the house felt heavier than ever. The papers had been read, the decisions laid out, yet it didn't feel final. It felt like the beginning of something darker. Anna retreated to her room that night, quietly clutching a small box of her mother's things. I could hear her muffled sobs through the door, the kind of raw, honest grief that broke my heart. She wasn't thinking about money. She was thinking about the woman she had lost. David, on the other hand, sat in the living room, staring blankly at the television. His jaw was tight, his eyes restless. He wasn't watching the screen. He was replaying Clara's words from the meeting. I knew my son. I could see the conflict on his face. He wanted to honor his mother's wishes, but he also wanted peace with his wife and Clara. She moved through the house like a queen surveying her territory, calm, composed, smiling faintly, as though the reading of the will had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. But beneath that smile, her mind was working. I could feel it. That night, as I stood in the kitchen making tea, I overheard her voice again. She was on the phone. "Yes, I'm telling you, the property is tied up, but that doesn't mean it's untouchable. These things can be challenged. You just need the right leverage." Her tone was low, sharp, confident. I froze, the teacup trembling in my hand. Who was she speaking to? A lawyer? A realtor? Or worse, someone waiting to buy what she intended to snatch? The next morning, Clara tried to play the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law. She offered to make breakfast, smiled at me politely, and asked Anna if she wanted tea. But Anna refused to even look at her. The tension between them was thick, and Clara didn't like being ignored. Later that day, she cornered me in the study. "Dad," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "You know David and I are just trying to do what's best for the family. I think Mom's will was, well, outdated. She wrote it years ago, right? Times change. Circumstances change. Don't you think it's fair to reconsider?" I looked at her, trying to keep my voice steady. "Fair? Your mother-in-law knew exactly what she was doing. She thought about this carefully, and I won't let anyone twist her wishes." Clara's smile faltered, just slightly, before returning. But in that moment I saw it. The flicker of frustration, the glint of determination. She wasn't going to stop. That evening, David approached me quietly. "Dad, maybe Clara's right. Maybe Mom wasn't thinking about the financial side of things. Maybe donating that land isn't the best idea." I turned to him, anger and disappointment mixing in my chest. "Your mother gave her life to this family, and this is how you repay her? By doubting her even after she's gone?" David lowered his head, ashamed, but I knew where those words had come from. Not from him, from her. Clara wasn't just planting seeds of doubt. She was watering them, nurturing them, until even my own son began to question his mother's legacy. And that was the moment I realized the real fight had begun. The tension in the house was no longer hidden. It lived in every corner, in every conversation, in every silent glance across the dinner table. Anna avoided Clara completely. If Clara entered a room, Anna would quietly excuse herself. At first, Clara pretended not to notice, but soon her patience wore thin. She didn't like being ignored. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, the silence became unbearable. David tried to make small talk, but his words fell flat. Finally, Clara placed her fork down and looked directly at Anna. "You've been sulking since the will was read," she said, her voice deceptively calm. "It's not healthy. We should be discussing practical solutions, not clinging to sentimental fantasies." Anna's eyes narrowed. "Clinging to fantasies? You mean respecting our mother's wishes? That's not a fantasy, Clara, that's loyalty." Clara's smile sharpened. "Loyalty doesn't put food on the table or secure futures. You think jewelry and charity are more important than your brother's stability? Than your niece's future?" Anna slammed her hand on the table, her voice shaking. "Don't you dare use your daughter as an excuse. Mom wanted fairness. She trusted us to respect that. You're the only one twisting it into greed." The room went silent. David looked down, ashamed, while I sat frozen, torn between stepping in and letting them speak their truths. Clara leaned back in her chair, her eyes glinting. "Greed? No, Anna. Greed is pretending that holding on to shiny necklaces is more important than securing real assets. Your mother's decisions were clouded by emotion, and we all know it." Anna stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I won't sit here and let you insult her. If you want to fight about this, fine. But don't pretend you're doing it for the family. You're doing it for yourself." She stormed out, leaving her plate untouched. The silence that followed was suffocating. David muttered, "She didn't have to overreact." But even he didn't sound convinced. I finally spoke, my voice low but sharp. "Clara, you've crossed a line. My wife's decisions will not be undone. Not while I'm alive." Clara tilted her head, her cold smile returning. "We'll see, Dad, we'll see." That night I couldn't sleep. I walked past Anna's room and heard her crying softly. In the living room, David sat slumped on the couch, his phone glowing in his hand as Clara whispered furiously beside him. I caught fragments of her words: petition, legal grounds, unfair division. My chest tightened. It was clear now this wasn't just tension. This was war, and Clara was preparing her battlefield. 2 days after the explosive dinner, the storm I had been dreading finally broke. I was in the study, sorting through old papers of my wife, her journals, letters, receipts, when Clara walked in, her heels clicking softly against the wooden floor. She didn't knock. She never did. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, her tone clipped and businesslike. I didn't look up. "If it's about the will, we've already talked enough." She walked closer, dropping a folder onto the desk in front of me. I frowned as I opened it. Inside were printed documents, draft petitions, financial assessments, even an outline of potential claims against the will. My heart sank. "What is this?" I demanded. Clara folded her arms, her cold smile firmly in place. "Options. Legal options. I spoke with an attorney friend of mine. There are grounds to argue that your wife's will was unfairly biased, influenced by emotion and potentially invalid." I stared at her in disbelief. "Invalid? That will was written years ago, carefully and notarized. Your mother-in-law knew exactly what she wanted." Clara leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Courts don't care about what she wanted. They care about fairness, about legal grounds. And believe me, I can make a strong case that David was unfairly treated." Anger flared in my chest. "You dare insult her memory like this? You think you can rewrite her wishes just to fatten your pockets?" Her smile didn't falter. "It's not about me. It's about my husband. About your son. Don't you think he deserves better than scraps?" Before I could respond, Anna appeared in the doorway. She must have overheard. Her face was pale, her eyes blazing with fury. "You're unbelievable," Anna spat. "Mom trusted you. She welcomed you into this family, treated you like her own daughter. And this is how you repay her? By trying to tear her will apart?" Clara turned her gaze slowly toward Anna, her voice dripping with disdain. "Your mother made mistakes. I'm just correcting them." Anna stepped forward, her fists clenched. "No, you're just proving what you've been all along, a parasite." For a moment, Clara's smile cracked. Just for a moment, but then she straightened, smoothing her hair back, her voice icy calm. "If that's how you feel, then you'd better prepare yourself, because I'm not backing down." She turned and walked out, her heels striking like gunshots against the floor. The silence that followed was unbearable. Anna's hands shook as she turned to me. "Dad, we can't let her do this. We can't let her destroy Mom's wishes." I placed a hand on her shoulder, though my own heart was heavy. "We won't, Anna. But understand this, Clara isn't just fighting for money. She's fighting for control, and that makes her dangerous." That night, the air in the house was suffocating. Clara and David locked themselves in their room, their muffled voices spilling through the walls. Anna sat with me in the living room, her head resting against my shoulder, whispering, "Mom would be so ashamed of this." I didn't answer, because deep down I feared Clara was only just getting started. The days that followed were a slow descent into chaos. Clara no longer bothered to hide her intentions. Her cold smiles, her whispered phone calls, the constant presence of legal documents spread across the dining table. It was all out in the open now. David, my son, became more distant with each passing day. He avoided my gaze, avoided Anna entirely, and when he did speak, it was always to echo Clara's words. Dad, maybe Clara's right. Maybe Mom wasn't being practical when she made the will. We can't just let emotions guide decisions like this. Every time he said it, my heart broke a little more. My wife had poured her life into raising our children with values, honor, loyalty, compassion, and now her own son repeated Clara's greed like it was scripture. One evening, Anna confronted him. "David, how can you let her poison you like this? Mom trusted you. She wanted you to carry on her legacy, not tear it apart." David's jaw tightened, but he didn't meet her eyes. "I'm just trying to think logically, Anna. Maybe you should too," Anna's voice cracked. "Logical? Or cowardly, because I don't recognize my brother anymore." The fight left the room heavy with bitterness. That night, Clara made her boldest move yet. She gathered us all in the living room, David sitting stiffly at her side. Her posture was regal, commanding, like a queen holding court. "I've thought about this carefully," she began, her voice smooth as glass. "And I believe the only way forward is to contest the will. We'll file a claim, argue unfair distribution, and demand a full review." Anna shot up from her seat. "You can't be serious. That will was airtight. Mom planned every detail." Clara interrupted, her tone sharp. "Airtight? Nothing is airtight when money is involved. Judges are swayed by fairness, not sentiment, and I intend to prove that your mother's choices were biased." Her words hung in the air like poison. I finally spoke, my voice heavy with fury. "You will not desecrate her memory." "Not while I'm alive," Clara's cold smile returned. "Then you'd better prepare yourself, Dad, because once this process starts, there's no turning back." The room was silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Anna's face was pale with rage, David's with shame, and mine with grief. As Clara rose to her feet, gathering her papers, she looked at each of us one by one. Her gaze lingered on me last, her lips curling into that same icy smile she had worn at the will reading. "You'll see," she whispered. "In the end, I always win." When she left the room, the silence was suffocating. Anna whispered shakily, "Dad, she's going to destroy everything Mom wanted." I placed a trembling hand over hers. "Not if we fight back, but we have to be ready for a battle none of us wanted." That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I finally accepted the truth. Clara wasn't just greedy, she was ruthless. And this war for my wife's legacy had only just begun. The courtroom was colder than I expected. The polished oak benches, the echo of footsteps, the rustle of papers, it all felt surreal. This wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was a war for my wife's legacy, for the memory of the woman who had held our family together. Clara walked in first, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She wore a tailored black suit, her hair pinned back, her face carrying that same smug confidence I'd seen since the day of the will reading. Beside her, David looked pale and restless, but he still followed her like a shadow. Anna squeezed my hand. "Dad, no matter what happens, we'll fight until the end." I nodded, though my throat felt like stone. The judge entered and the case began. Clara's lawyer stood tall, speaking with the kind of polish only money could buy. "Your Honor," he began, "this will is fundamentally unfair. It favors sentimentality over logic, neglecting the rightful financial interests of my client and her husband." I wanted to shout, but I bit my tongue. Then Clara herself took the stand. Her voice was sweet, too sweet. "My mother-in-law was difficult," she said, feigning a broken sigh. "She never truly accepted me. She always favored Anna over David, and this bias is clear in the distribution of her estate." The words burned through me, lies coated in sugar. Then came the blow I feared most. David was called to testify. He stepped onto the stand, his hands trembling. I prayed he would find his courage, that he'd remember his mother's love. But when he opened his mouth, my heart cracked. She always made Anna the priority," David said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. "Clara's right. The will doesn't reflect fairness. It reflects favoritism." Anna gasped beside me. Tears filled her eyes. "David, how can you say that?" she whispered. But he didn't look at her. It was like watching my wife's legacy be stabbed in the back by her own son. Clara smirked as David stepped down. She thought she had won. And for a moment even I feared she might be right. Then our lawyer stood. He was a quiet man, reserved, but today his voice rang with steel. "Your Honor, before you consider these claims, I'd like to present new evidence discovered in the decedent's personal files." A sealed letter addressed directly to her children, as well as a video message recorded just weeks before her passing. The courtroom went silent. Clara's confident smile faltered. The bailiff brought the letter forward, and the judge allowed it to be read aloud. My wife's handwriting, shaky but still hers, appeared on the page. "To my beloved children, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. I know there may be disputes over what I leave behind, but please remember, my choices were not made from favoritism, but from understanding your strengths and weaknesses. Anna, you have always been responsible. David, you have struggled with influence, and I fear those around you may not always guide you well. My decisions were made to protect you both, even if you don't see it now." David's face turned white. He shifted in his seat, his lips trembling. Clara grabbed his arm, but he pulled it away. Then the video played on a screen at the front of the courtroom. There she was, my wife. Fragile, lying in her hospital bed, but her eyes still warm, still fierce. "My children," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "If you fight over money, then I have failed as a mother. David, don't let anyone turn you against your sister. Anna, protect your brother, even when he falters. And to my husband, thank you for loving me all these years. Everything I leave is meant to carry you forward, not tear you apart." Anna sobbed openly. I felt tears burn my own eyes. The judge turned to Clara. Mrs. Clara, do you have anything to say in response? For the first time since this nightmare began, Clara's mask cracked. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. David stood suddenly. His voice shook, but it was filled with guilt. I lied, he blurted. Clara pressured me. She told me to say those things. But Mom was right. She always wanted the best for us. And I betrayed her memory. Gasps filled the courtroom. Clara's face twisted into fury. You fool, she hissed at David. You've ruined everything. But it was too late. The judge slammed his gavel. The will stands as written. Case dismissed. Clara's face drained of color. Her empire of manipulation crumbled in an instant. She stormed out of the courtroom, her heels echoing like the retreat of a defeated general. David fell to his knees, sobbing, clutching his face in shame. Anna rushed to him, her anger melting into heartbreak. We'll fix this, David, but you have to fight with us, not against us. I placed my hand on both of their shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I felt my wife's presence, not in the money, not in the will, but in the love she had tried so hard to protect. As we left the courtroom, Anna whispered, Mom won today, and I realized she was right. My wife's greatest revenge wasn't punishing Clara. It was ensuring that her family, broken though we were, would find our way back together. The courthouse steps felt heavier than the courtroom itself. The crowd outside had mostly dispersed, but the tension still clung to us like a storm cloud refusing to pass. Anna walked beside me, her arm tightly linked through mine as if anchoring me to the ground. David trailed behind us, his head bowed so low he might have been carrying chains around his neck. For a long moment, none of us spoke. We simply walked, each of us drowning in our own thoughts. Clara had vanished the moment the gavel fell, slipping away as if she could outrun defeat. But her absence didn't erase the damage she had caused. Finally, Anna broke the silence. Dad, do you think she'll come back? Try something else. I sighed, my chest tight. Maybe. People like Clara don't know how to accept defeat. But this time she's exposed. Even David saw it. Even the court saw it. Her power is broken even if her pride isn't. David flinched at his name. His steps slowed, then stopped altogether. We turned to see him standing in the middle of the courthouse plaza, trembling. His eyes brimmed with tears, his lips pressed together like he was fighting an invisible enemy. Dad. Anna. His voice cracked, barely a whisper. I don't know how to face either of you. I don't know how to live with what I did. Anna's anger, which had been simmering for weeks, softened. She stepped toward him slowly. You let her control you, David. You let her twist you. But you're here now. You admitted the truth. That matters. He shook his head violently. It doesn't. I stood in front of a judge and said Mom was biased, that she didn't love us equally. Do you realize what I did? I spit on her memory because I was too weak to stand up to Clara. The pain in his voice pierced me deeper than any knife could. For weeks I had resented him, even hated him at moments. But now, standing there, I saw not a betrayer but a broken man who had fallen into the web of someone far stronger and crueler than him. I stepped closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. Your mother knew you, David. She knew you'd be vulnerable to influence. That's why she wrote what she did in that letter. She wasn't punishing you. She was protecting you. She forgave you before you even stumbled. David's knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground, sobbing openly. People walking past glanced at us, but I didn't care. This was my son, my flawed, broken, but still mine. I crouched down, pulling him into my arms, holding him the way I had when he was a child. Anna knelt beside us, resting her hand on his back. For the first time in so long, the three of us weren't divided by anger or greed or manipulation. We were bound again by grief, by truth, by love. When David finally looked up, his face was streaked with tears. I want to fix this. I don't care if it takes years. I want to honor Mom again. Tell me how, Dad. Tell me where to start. I smiled weakly, brushing his hair back like I used to when he was small. We start by going home. By remembering her not through courtrooms and documents, but through the life she built for us. That's how we win back what Clara tried to take. As we rose to our feet, the weight on my chest lifted ever so slightly. The storm wasn't over, not by a long shot. Clara was still out there somewhere, wounded but dangerous. But in that moment, for the first time since my wife's death, I believed we could face her, not as individuals, but as a family, and deep down I felt her presence with us, like a quiet whisper carried on the wind. You're stronger together. Don't forget. Clara didn't disappear for long. By the end of the week, her shadow was already creeping back into our lives, not through lawyers or judges this time, but through whispers, rumors, and poison spread among relatives and family friends. I first heard about it from my sister-in-law, who called me one evening. She's been telling people you manipulated the court, she said, her tone heavy with disapproval. That you brainwashed David into changing his testimony at the last minute. My hand tightened on the phone. That's a lie. I know, she said quickly, but lies travel faster than truth. Be prepared, and she was right. Within days, neighbors, cousins, even distant acquaintances started looking at us differently. Some avoided eye contact. Others asked pointed questions disguised as polite concern. Clara was painting herself as the victim, spinning her loss into a story of injustice. David, hearing these rumors, nearly broke all over again. She's not done, he muttered, pacing across the living room. She'll keep doing this until there's nothing left of me. Until there's nothing left of us, Anna crossed her arms, her voice steady but firm. Then let her. People who know us, who knew Mom, they'll see through her eventually. Lies can't last forever, but David shook his head. You don't understand. Clara doesn't care about truth. She only cares about control. If she can't win legally, she'll destroy us socially. Piece by piece, I placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we face her again, not with lawyers this time, but with integrity. We don't fight her lies by shouting louder. We fight them by living the truth Mom left us. But Clara didn't stop at rumors. A week later, she showed up at our doorstep. It was evening. The sun was setting, painting the house in golden light, when the doorbell rang. Anna opened it and froze. Clara stood there, her face pale, her eyes bloodshot as if she hadn't slept in days. David, she called, her voice sharp but desperate. You owe me an explanation. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You ruined everything we built. David stepped into the doorway, his jaw clenched. What we built, Clara, was a lie. You twisted me against my own family, against my own mother's memory. I won't let you do it again. Clara's voice cracked, the facade slipping. I did it for us, for our future. Do you think your family would ever care for you the way I do? Without me, you're nothing. The words cut through the evening air like glass shattering. Anna gasped. I felt my stomach churn. David didn't waver this time. No, Clara. Without you, I can finally be myself again. And I don't want you in my life anymore. Her face twisted with fury. She raised her hand as if to strike him, but froze when she noticed me standing just behind him. I met her gaze steady and unflinching. You've lost, Clara, I said quietly. Not in court. Not in gossip. You've lost where it matters most, in the family you tried to tear apart. For a moment, her mask shattered completely. Her eyes brimmed with rage, but also fear. The fear of someone who realizes their power is gone. Without another word, she turned and stormed down the steps, her footsteps echoing against the pavement until they faded into silence. David sank into the couch, shaking. It's over, isn't it? He asked, his voice fragile. I sat beside him, resting a hand on his back. Almost. People like Clara don't disappear quietly. But she no longer has a hold over you. That's the first real victory. Anna knelt in front of her brother, taking his hands in hers. The rest, we'll face together, just like Mom wanted. For the first time, David nodded without hesitation. A flicker of strength returned to his eyes. Clara's shadow was still out there, but it no longer owned him. And in that moment, sitting together in the fading light, I realized something my wife had known all along. Greed and lies burn out. But family, if you fight hard enough, can endure. Life didn't magically return to normal after Clara stormed out of our lives. The scars she left were deep, and some days it felt like we were still bleeding. But slowly, step by step, we began to stitch ourselves back together. The first change came from David. For weeks he carried guilt like a chain around his neck, but one morning he knocked on my study door. He stood there awkwardly holding a small box in his hands. Dad, he whispered, I found this in Mum's things. I thought maybe we could go through it together. Inside the box were letters, handwritten notes my wife had left over the years. Birthday wishes, small reminders of love. Little pieces of her heart saved carefully in envelopes. Anna joined us, and for hours we sat together reading her words, laughing and crying in turns. One letter stood out. It was short, almost cryptic, but powerful. If the world pulls you apart, remember that family isn't about never falling. It's about always finding your way back. David broke down as Anna read it aloud. She knew, he murmured. She knew I'd fall. And she still loved me anyway. Anna reached over and squeezed his hand. She never stopped, David, and neither will we. From that day on, something changed in him. He began showing up, really showing up. He helped Anna repair things around the house. He joined me at the family business, learning skills he had once brushed off. And slowly he began to earn back our trust. But healing wasn't just about rebuilding. It was about honoring. So we decided to do something together. Create a scholarship fund in my wife's name. Anna suggested it one evening, her eyes bright with the same fire her mother used to have. Mom always cared about education, she said. What if we use part of what she left behind to help others? That way her name lives on in something good, not just in this family feud. David nodded immediately. It's the least we can do. She gave us everything. It's time we give something back. Working on the fund became our therapy. Every form filled out, every meeting attended, every small step toward establishing it felt like reclaiming a piece of her. For the first time since the funeral, I felt proud again, not of money, not of victory, but of the people my children were becoming. Of course, Clara didn't vanish entirely. We heard rumors now and then. Stories of her moving to another city, trying to climb into another wealthy family, always chasing the next prize. But each rumor felt less threatening, more pathetic. She was no longer the storm over our heads. She was just a ghost fading into irrelevance. One evening, months later, as we sat around the dinner table eating Anna's cooking, David raised his glass. His voice shook at first but grew stronger as he spoke. To Mum, he said, for teaching us that money isn't what matters. For teaching us that love is worth fighting for, even when we fail. I don't deserve her forgiveness, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to honor her. Anna smiled through her tears. She would be proud of you, David, she really would. I raised my glass too, my throat tight. To your mother. The woman who gave us life, gave us love, and even in death, gave us a second chance. The clink of our glasses echoed softly, almost like a benediction, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt peace. Not complete, not perfect, but real. The scholarship fund became more than just a project. It became our lifeline. Within months, applications started coming in, letters from young students who dreamed of studying but couldn't afford it. Reading their stories reminded us of the values my wife had lived by. Compassion, sacrifice, and the belief that opportunity should never depend on wealth alone. At the first award ceremony, we stood together on a small stage at the local community hall. Anna gave a speech, her voice steady and graceful. This scholarship isn't just about financial support, she said, looking at the crowd. It's about honoring a woman who believed that love and hard work were the greatest inheritance any of us could leave behind. David followed, nervous at first, but then speaking with a raw honesty that silenced the room. I almost lost myself, he confessed. I let greed blind me. I let someone else's voice drown out my mother's, but her love, her wisdom, pulled me back. This fund is my way of saying I'm sorry, my way of keeping her alive in every student who gets a chance to chase their dream. When he stepped down, the applause was thunderous. I could almost see my wife smile in the crowd, as if she were standing there proud of her children. That night, after the ceremony, we went to the cemetery together. We brought flowers, her favorite lilies, and placed them gently on her grave. The three of us stood in silence, the cool night air wrapping around us. Finally, I spoke. You were right, my love. You always were. Family isn't about avoiding storms. It's about standing together through them. And somehow, even from beyond, you taught us that lesson one more time. Anna knelt, whispering softly, We did it, Mum. Clara didn't win. You did. And we'll make sure you keep winning every year with every life this fund touches. David's voice cracked, but he forced the words out. I'm sorry, Mum, I'll never let anyone use me like that again. I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm your son. The tears came freely, but they weren't just of sorrow anymore. They were cleansing, washing away months of bitterness and betrayal, leaving behind something purer. As we walked back to the car, I felt lighter than I had in years. Clara's shadow no longer loomed over us. She had tried to fracture us, but in doing so, She had given us the chance to rebuild stronger. In the weeks that followed, I heard less and less about Clara. Rumors said she had left town after her schemes collapsed, chasing another wealthy man in another city. Perhaps she'd succeed for a while, perhaps not. But I no longer cared. Her chapter in our story was over. What mattered now was us. One evening, sitting in the living room with Anna and David, I realized the house didn't feel empty anymore. The silence that had once suffocated me now felt peaceful. The laughter we shared, the meals we cooked, the plans we made, it was life again. Not the same life we had before my wife passed, but a new one she had guided us toward even in her absence. I closed my eyes and pictured her. Her gentle smile, the warmth of her hand in mine, the quiet strength in her eyes, and for the first time since losing her, I didn't feel only grief. I felt gratitude. She had left us love. She had left us strength. She had left us a way to find each other again, and that, more than any inheritance, was her true legacy. What would you do if someone tried to steal your family's legacy? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story shocked you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More unbelievable real-life stories are coming your way. You don't want to miss them. Remember this. Sometimes the people closest to us can cut the deepest wounds. Stay alert, stay strong. And I'll see you in the next story.